Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
All right, everyone, we are back. New edition of Celtics Beat. Thanks so much for hanging out here with us. Hopefully your weekend is off to a great start, pardon me, or if you are listening, of course, early in the week. It is a podcast after all. Who knows what the Celtics are up to at this point in time. They got a home game coming up on Sunday as we sit here right now. That is against the Pelicans, and then a little quick trip to Toronto, back home for a couple against Orlando and Atlanta. And that, really takes us through the next week. So quiet week for the Celtics on the heels of what largely was a very successful road trip. Obviously, wins over Minnesota and blowout of Houston, took care of Denver, albeit without Jokic. And then, you fall, of course, at Oklahoma City. The Celtics, though, respond to all of that by coming back home and really kind of having their doors blown off by the Kings in the fourth quarter in particular. Part of the issues that we do need to discuss for this imperfect, hope to be perfect kind of contender, a team that felt so perfect last year, but it's not the case. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, and Gary Washburn is here with us from the Boston Globe, part of the CLNS family as well. Gary, how you been?
Good, guys. Same old. Obviously, almost to the mid-season. It's been an interesting season so far, but everything's good, and I'm covering the ups and downs of this team because they're getting to the point where the minute you count on them, they do something a little different. They go against the grain, and I just thought that Sacramento game was a game that it was a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into it. You wrote about it. Obviously, people can check out the article, but I think in large part it starts with the title. And I don't know if you wrote this title or if that was the editors, but outworked and unfocused, Celtics have slipped into being just another contender. Now, if this were a few years back, people would look at it and say, one, what else is new? Outworked, unfocused, inconsistent, what have you. But the whole just another contender thing, that would have felt like a compliment, honestly. But now, obviously, we see what they do, what they did last year and just almost wire to wire and no issues in the postseason. And now you come back into this run back largely the same team. You improve in some areas. You're generally healthy. I know there was the Porzingis injury at the start of the year, but generally this team, some bodies in and out of the lineup. You expect that. Every team goes through it. But mostly this team is right where you want it to be health-wise. And yet there's just something going on that it goes beyond roster construction because we know there's no issue there. It goes beyond basketball. There's something kind of within the DNA of this team right now that is, I don't know if we kind of label it championship hangover or, there is, as again, talked about in the article, there is a certain level of lack of focus that is happening right now that you don't want them to be that team. And there are so many of these teams year to year that just says, we'll flip the switch when the playoff gets here. We'll be that team again because we just were. Do you worry about that team repeating what it did last year, given what we're seeing this year?
Yeah, I worry about the other two teams. Like in my story, I pointed out, like they won the East last year by 14 games. Right. There was 2 50-win teams in the East, the Celtics and the Knicks. Like it was a bunch of mediocrity in the East last year, and they won the overall best record in the league by 7 games. The Thunder had 57 wins. Now the Cavs are on a 73-win pace, and the Thunder might be on a 70-win pace. So there's 2 teams who are just legitimately better than the Celtics. And the Celtics are on a 58-win pace. And if you would have said that, that's not a bad record. 58-24, probably good enough to get that number 2 seed, depending on what the Knicks do. But it just seems like their level of consistency and concentration isn't there because you're talking about 7 home losses already. They had 4 all of last year, and they lost at home to Memphis. Obviously, Memphis, a quality team, but, fell apart in the fourth quarter against Memphis, fell apart in the fourth quarter against Indiana, fell apart in the fourth quarter against Sacramento, where they were up 72-63, and then they literally got outscored 34-11. And it's just like, what's going on here by a Kings team without De'Aaron Fox? And it's not only like teams are playing better against them, which they are, guys. I just think it's lack of concentration. And it started, to me, if you look at, I don't know if you guys watched the whole Sacramento game. Like, they lost that game in the fourth quarter when Devin Carter hit those 2 threes. Like, that game, to me, they were done. Like, he got 2 open threes, and he was fourth NBA game. He was 2 for 10 from 3 in those first 3 games. So, of course, they let him shoot. And he hit them both like Steph. And after that, the Celtics were down 6, and they were just never the same. And then they get discouraged. Shots aren't falling. Tatum drives to the basket repeatedly, is not getting foul calls, so he gets discouraged, missing the layup, or he's trying to make some tight pocket pass that gets picked off. Like, there's just so many things going on with this team. And it's not that they're not good, they're not contenders, or they're suck, or they're trash, nothing like that. But you're talking about, are they contenders for this year? This is not 24. If you guys were talking about earlier, the Cavs are for real. The Cavs are not scared of the Celtics. They're not looking at next year. Well, maybe we'll reach the conference finals this year and lose to the Celtics, and then next year maybe what? No, I'm sure Cleveland's fully feeling like we can go to the finals. And the same thing with the Thunder. Like, totally, there's no fear. So we're talking about this year. We're not talking about last year. We're not that roster won the finals. If you look at the numbers, like, nobody besides Baby Payton is having a really standout season, like, so far. Everybody's kind of going with what they do. Some shooting numbers are down. Their defense is down. And Joe can point to some of the statistics. Oh, we're 4th in defense and all that. But look at the fourth quarter. Like, that defensive fourth quarter against Sacramento, the one against Indiana, like, they're getting punched in the mouth. And I'm not sure, some of that's effort, desire, discouragement, because threes aren't going down and shots aren't going down. So if you're talking about, if you want the Celtics to lose in the second round, don't complain. Don't say anything. They're fine. They're great. If you want them to make the finals, I think there's a reason for concern and some things that need to change and have to be done, have to improve. I'm not talking about, let's trade Tatum. No, I'm not saying that. But there has to be some adjustments mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, there's been a cajillion moments in the tenure of Joe Mazzulla of you and him kind of verbally sparring over 3-point shooting, and I don't need to beat that dead horse, but the idea of shooting variance being, this is what's hurting this team. The threes just aren't going down. I see that. I hear that. But this team also has to recognize that when the shots aren't going down, you have to be crisper at everything else. Like, people were like, hey, man, that the Oklahoma City loss, like, what do you think? I'm like, well, this team needs to realize that if it's not going to shoot well, they just can't turn the ball over a ton of times either. Like, that game was winnable. They missed open shots, but they also turned the ball over like idiots at the end of the game too. So it's last year's team was so good that I think it maybe has morphed our brains a little bit to thinking like, oh, this team's just going to be red hot from 3 for 82 games in the regular season and 19 games in the postseason. Where in reality, Gary, is this team just like, okay, if the shots aren't falling, last year was an anomaly. It was an incredible anomaly. It will go down in NBA history as one of the most single seasons, like the most dominant single seasons in NBA history. But when we pull the curtain back and kind of stand all the way back, is this team forgetting that if the shots aren't falling, that everything else has to be significantly crisper on both ends of the floor for them to reap? Because it's like, yeah, you can turn the ball over 20 times if you're shooting 40% from 3 and you hit 20 of them. But when you're 11 of 41 or 10 of 45, the other stuff that you were good at last year has to be even better than it was last year. Does that seem to be like the case to you?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to improve on all aspects of the game in terms of concentration too. Like, last night, Tatum drove to the basket, either missed the layup, thought he was fouled, and just stopped and like shook his head, and then got back on defense as opposed to just get back on defense. Derek White like put his head down a couple of times because he missed a lot of open threes as he usually makes. Derek White is going through a slump. It's a prolonged slump. Now he's not terrible from three, but he's just not hitting those open looks, because him hitting open looks is key to the offense, because he's going to get so many because of the focus on Tatum and Brown. He's missing open looks. Al's missing open looks. Hauser, there's good Hauser and there's not so good Hauser. If Hauser's going 0 for 5, 0 for 6, like, it's no reason to really have him on the floor, And so you don't have, to me, that bucket getter off the bench, because teams are now shifting their focus to Peyton, and Peyton is trying to deal with the adjustments to him.
He's in a slump too.
Huh?
He's in a slump too.
Yeah, totally. And they're turning him into a driver, and they're putting bigger defenders on him, and they're making him have to beat guys, like kind of a key sequence last night where he kind of shoved and he got the little jumper over Malik Monk, but they called a charge. They called offensive foul. I don't know how he hasn't had many offensive fouls this year, but maybe that's something that officials are starting to look for. Hey, man, he's clearing space. Teams are adjusting to the Celtics. They're taking more threes. They're defending the Celtics. The Kings had that zone. The Celtics didn't really know what to do with it. And to me, it's a level, like you said, Evan, of having to do everything else, get back on freaking defense. Quit shaking your head or nodding or being down or slumping your head after a missed shot. Get back on D. One time last night, as I pointed out in the story, Jayson went to the rim. Oh, I missed. Oh, man. Got back on defense. He goes to the left wing, I think, to cover maybe Trey Lyles. And then there's Monk at the open of the top of the key for a three, and Monk hits it. Because you're going, the Kings played 5-on-4 because Tatum was slow to get back, then covered the wrong man. There's just lapses like that. And it was, I said, they played good ball on the road. They played good ball. They they were a solid fourth quarter from winning that Oklahoma City game, and then it kind of fell apart, and then they left, Dort open for a couple threes, and he had struggled, but then he hit 3 of them, and they lost, right? But I just don't see the consistency. And I don't want to hear guys about, well, it was the first game after a long road. They were on the road for a week, man. It was not like one of these 7-game, 14-day treks where you're just, you know where time is. They literally had 2 full days off before Friday's game. I mean, they played Tuesday in Denver. They had Wednesday and Thursday off. The whole first game back from a road, you're playing a team without its best player. You're playing a team that, when's the last time Sacramento, I had to look at, what's the last time Sacramento won in Boston? It's got to be 10 years, at least. The Kings are not a great road team. I mean, they're better than road than at home. They're actually awful at home this year. It's probably one of the reasons Mike Brown got fired, but they were ready to sort of let go of the rope when it was 72-63. And the Celtics couldn't build on that lead. Then Sacramento caught him at the end of the quarter. Then here comes Devin Carter with 2 threes to begin the fourth. And all of a sudden the Celtics are down 6. And they're like, what just happened here? And they just don't have the gill at this point, the fortitude to rally and go, okay, let's get this game. And so to me, it was effort and focus and discouragement from missing open shots, from taking threes, from, missing layups. It's just a combination of things.
Yeah, I mean, the aggravating thing about last night, this game against the Kings, and anyone who watched this, and obviously the 3 of us did, but anyone out there listening, watching, who watched that game, this as well. I'm not the type of person, Gary, that is sitting there getting all riled up watching a game in the regular season and yelling at the TV and all that stuff, unless I got, money on it or something like that. But generally reserve that behavior for the postseason when the games really matter. And yet, fourth quarter last night, it just, there were so many instances where, again, it wasn't, look, shots don't fall. That's just part of it. But the effort required just to, go for a rebound that they just seemed, and I don't want to take anything away from the performance because he was excellent, but the Celtics seemed in many ways so just sort of okay with Domantas Sabonis hauling in rebound after, like, they weren't even challenging him. It wasn't all positioning. It wasn't all just tallest guy on the floor or what have you. It was just, acquiescing and just sort of backing out of the way. And especially in that fourth quarter where things are unraveling, you'd see them start to rely on the three or outside shot and what have you, and trying to shoot their way back into the game. And fine, that's just how they want to play. It is what it is. But ball bounds off the rim and you'll see like three Kings in the vicinity, and the Celtics are already working on running back. They're already, they're just not even going for the second chance. And that to me was what was especially sort of disconcerting about this game, and honestly just their disposition. That's why I mentioned off the top of the show, there's just something that I don't like in the DNA of this group right now, that it's just we're the defending champs and there's nothing you can do about it until we're not. And when we get to the postseason again, we're going to show you. But maybe they can't flip that switch, or maybe somebody, does suffer whatever kind of injury. They go down, they're not the way we want them to look come April, May, June. So I'm rambling here, but there's that to me was the thing. It was they were just, even if they managed to win that game, they were just failing the eye test time and time again down the floor. That's what was aggravating.
Yeah, I mean, I look at their losses, guys, and like I think it's not like, you're right, Adam. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but if you look at their losses this season, 2 to Indiana, that loss at home to Golden State, the loss at home to Atlanta, a respectable loss to Cleveland without Jaylen Brown, with a game they could have won at Cleveland. They lost at home to Memphis. They lost at home to Chicago. That loss at Orlando, where they led by I think 15 at halftime, and then just kind of went through the motions and got shut down. The loss at home to Philadelphia, like Oklahoma City. But I mean, if you look at their losses, guys, like only 2 are like you'd say, yep, legit losses: Oklahoma City and Cleveland. That's it. The other 9, you're like, they probably should have won that game, or why are they losing to this team? You could put Memphis in there, so 3 of the 11 losses, but at Indiana, they lost in overtime. Golden State, a game that now the Warriors are playing terribly, or they were, but the Warriors played a really good game that night. That whole loss to Atlanta without Trey, that kind of blew their NBA Cup chances. Like, they're losing to teams that they should beat. And last year, that's the thing. This last year's team with this schedule is probably 34-4, something like that, because they didn't really let down against opponents. But this time, it's the quality of the opponent. Sac, Chicago, twice against Indiana, Atlanta, Philadelphia at home, and the Sixers just lost last night at home to New Orleans without Zion. I mean, the Pelicans are a mess, but they happened to win at Philadelphia last night. Like, the losses are getting concerning because of the competition, and that's got to be mental. I do understand, though. Teams are playing better. Like, teams are just playing. Guys are stepping up. Guys are having sometimes career nights, but we all knew Sabonis rebounds, Monk scores, and DeRozan scores. All those guys did what they did, and they did it better. Tatum, 15 points. You can't have Tatum's got to have more than 15 points. Like, guys, Derek White's got to be better. Like, it's just,
especially right after Jennings calls him out. And
yeah, exactly. 15 points. You
better respond with more than 15 points.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, it's not. Well, they've had this really, difficult schedule. I mean, they've done what they've done good against. They beat Minnesota twice. They blew out Houston. They beat Cleveland at home. They've beaten Detroit, who's a solid team now. They've beaten them 3 times. They've beaten Milwaukee 3 times. So it's not a talent thing. It's not, well, this team just isn't as good or they're late. It's when they play teams they should beat. That's why, now with Zion coming back off his suspension tomorrow, but Sunday against the Pelicans becomes kind of like you hope that they step up. It sounds like a blowout, but you don't know. And that's the thing. It's the concentration against some of the lesser opponents. Like, losing twice to the Pacers, the Bulls, the Hawks, teams that they should have beaten. And last year, this team did not have that type of issue. So to me, it's mostly mental concentration and then falling apart in the fourth quarter. Indiana, I think, went on a 13-0 run in the middle of the fourth quarter. If the Celtics cut it to 2, Philadelphia blew them out in the fourth quarter on Christmas Day. Like, they're letting go of the rope, and I'm not sure why late in games.
Let's take a quick break today. Today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the best place Hear it again to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. It's really simple. Just think about it. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your money all season long on Prize Picks.
Yeah, and Kaufman, so many things make Prize Picks great. We've been talking about flex play the entire time because nobody else is doing that. Flex play means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit.
Getting your money couldn't be any easier. In as little as 15 minutes, you watch the money roll into your account. Prize Picks even uses Venmo. Truly, it couldn't be easier. There is nothing more simple. So download the app today. Use the code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download that app today. Code CLNS, $50 instantly after playing your first lineup for $5. Prize Picks, run your game.
You could even add that Oklahoma City game late in the fourth where, they were right there. There was neck and neck, and then Oklahoma City just pulled away in what felt like the blink of an eye. It was like all of a sudden, oh, they're down what now? Oh, okay, whatever. Like, I guess this is over. I want to use Tatum's words a little bit because last year he said something I thought that was extremely important, and I'm glad he said it. It was about previous trips in the playoffs and why this one that resulted in a championship was different than the previous ones was because they didn't skip any steps. I loved how he said that. And we often talked about Boston playing with their food too much, letting a series against Atlanta go to 6 games or keeping teams around longer than they should. They didn't have that killer instinct. They didn't want to get rid of teams in 5 games and 4 games and be in not understanding the value of having that downtime, that rest to build you up for the next series. And last year, obviously, they dispatched everybody in 4 and 5 games. So clearly they understood we can't skip any steps. We have to get this done. Does it feel like they're trying to skip steps right now? Can they afford to skip steps right now, considering the way the rest of the NBA is? Because you look around, Cleveland is not skipping any steps. They continue to absolutely kill everybody they play. Their offense is unbelievably good. They have 2 good, big defensive guys that play pretty much every second of the game. Oklahoma City, on the meanwhile, they have the best perimeter defense in the NBA by a mile. And they're led by what I would consider the lead MVP candidate right now. They're not skipping any steps. So to use Tatum's words against him, does it feel like Boston is skipping steps? And can they afford to, considering the other guys that are in the contender status certainly aren't right now?
I think they said all the right things at the beginning of training camp where they didn't want to skip steps and this is a new season and we're going to take it one day at a time, and we're not even going to think about the playoffs. We're going to get ourselves together now. And I think that sounds great, but I think they're guilty of looking ahead. They're guilty, I think, of just kind of getting bored with the process, bored with some of the opponents. It's great to get up for the big guys, but you got to take care of business against the teams that are capable of beating you, but shouldn't beat you. But you look at Cleveland. Cleveland's not perfect, but I thought an interesting thing that told me about Cleveland was the night after Oklahoma. They had a really bizarre Oklahoma City, Toronto home back-to-back, right? Emotional win over Oklahoma City. Everybody plays. Great game. High ratings. Then here come the Raptors. And the Raptors, they rest Donovan Mitchell. So the Raptors are playing well that night because the Raptors, with Barrett and with Scotty Barnes and with Quigley, they got talent. They're not, obviously, they're headed straight for the lottery, but they have guys that on a particular night can get you. And they led the Cavaliers most of the way. Then here comes Garland with a 40-piece. Guys step up. They win, 129, 122. Like, they get the dub. Wasn't pretty. They didn't cover the spread. It was an ugly win, but they responded and said, "You're not going to come in and spoil our party after we didn't beat the Thunder. We're going to do whatever it takes to beat you, even though we're not at our best." And that's the thing. Where Oklahoma City comes back and beats the brakes out of the Knicks after losing to Cleveland. I mean, they just pushed. They beat the Knicks twice in 6 days. Like, they just beat the brakes off of them. And the Celtics, I just think, have to get that. And I'm going to use my Rocky 3 reference. They got to get the eye of the tiger back. Like, and I don't know if they need Apollo Creed to visit training camp and get them back where they have fire again. But they definitely need to have that fire to where, no, we're not going to let Sacramento come in. Because you knew it was, okay, the Kings hit, I think, 8 threes in the first quarter. Like, okay, Sacramento is here to play. Like, this new Doug Christie sack team is not Mike Brown sack team. They came in, we're here to win. We know you're coming off a long road trip. So you knew, okay, the Celtics aren't going to just pull away and win by 25. This is not going to happen. You're going to have to grind this game out. So I'm not saying, oh, they should have blown the Kings out. The Kings weren't even, shouldn't be on the floor with them. No, last night was going to be a tough game. But you got to find it in your fortitude to play better in the fourth quarter and not get outscored 38-21. That's embarrassing. You can't let Sabonis sit at the three-point line like, okay, who's going to guard me here, and just, can an open three. Like, they got embarrassed and they stopped trying. And then they got, and Mazzulla, who never throws in the towel, threw in the towel with 2.5 minutes left. Like, he saw it. Like, guys, just hit the showers. Like,
I've only seen him do that one other time. It was that Milwaukee game. They were getting
when they were
their teeth kicked in, and that was the only time I've seen Mazzulla say, "No, we're not even trying here." That's really it. So it's like, for me, I don't know. It's frustrating, Kaufman. And when you look at, coming off of last year where everybody was hitting 40% of their threes, this year when it doesn't happen, you would hope that they would, find different ways to win basketball games and just stop, start relying on the 3-point shot so much. You know what I mean?
Well, we've been talking about that for a while. It's the, again, like you just said, you need to be able to win other than, you need to be able to win on nights that the threes aren't falling. But beyond that, there's a mental toughness that I've alluded to multiple times and Gary's talked about and wrote about that they haven't been displaying. There's, beyond all of that, the, don't read your own press clippings and all of these things. I understand that, like, it's everything they said in the offseason and media day and leading into the year about, being the hunted and wanting the red dot on the forehead and all that. Like, that was going to come to fruition when you're the defending champs. That's what's going to happen. But I don't need them to just entirely change the way, the style in which they play basketball that led to so much success last year. And I still believe is going to be largely successful for them this year. You just want them to respond on certain nights when something isn't going right. Like you said, find another way. If not another specific strategy on the floor. Okay, well, let's go more inside. Let's try and attack. Let's try and draw fouls. Like, it's the mental component that feels like on certain nights, like last night in the fourth quarter, for whatever reason, long grind of a season, coming off a trip, I don't know. It's sort of missing. It's eluding them right now. So that's what we need them to clean up, obviously. But the in the spirit of embarrassing, Gary used that word earlier. What was just to take us away from the negativity for a moment, or at least turn the negativity onto somebody else. The embarrassing was this whole, Jayson Tatum, Brandon Jennings thing. Not so much on the Tatum side of things, even though, responding with 15 points, not a great look after you're going to respond on social media. But Jennings, I just think this is the evolution of commentary as a result of social media and podcasts and all these different platforms that didn't exist decades ago. Is just a fascinating dynamic to coverage in sports in general, but in a league like the NBA or the NFL, obviously most prevalent. You've got Brandon Jennings never, look, he accomplished a hell of a lot more in the NBA than I ever did or ever will, but by NBA standards, didn't do much. He didn't last a decade, didn't average 20 points a game, didn't win anything other than being, first team all rookie, back in his first year, obviously, was out of the league before he was 30. And yet still kind of has the nerve to go on, I guess, a podcast or wherever he was. I don't know if it's his podcast or he was a guest or whatever he was doing. ESPN, where I don't even know. Wherever he existed, he said that Jayson Tatum was the softest Celtics superstar ever. And that would mean something if it came from Kevin Garnett, right? Or Paul Pierce, or, some top 75, top 50 player all time, especially a Celtic. When someone like Brandon Jennings says it, I understand everyone's sort of compulsion to want to just laugh at it. But what I wanted to talk to you about specifically, Gary, because you've covered this team for a long time, or this league for a long time, you've been around these guys for a long time. I thought what Joe Mazzulla said in response to this was just so spot on. And I think about it all the time. I think about it in regard to, certain members of Celtics history, for that matter. But you don't often hear it vocalized, which is that a lot of guys play their careers, whatever happens, and then they retire, and over a certain period of time, they believe that ultimately they were maybe better than they were, and their careers were better than they were. And they feel as though they can come out and make comments like this and that it's going to mean anything. And I'm curious how many people, or how often you feel like you're running into this situation when you are either interviewing someone or just, watching TNT or ESPN or wherever, some podcast or something on Instagram, something on social media, and you're just hearing these players. It's like, man, do you remember when you were in the league and what that looked like and what you could and couldn't do?
Well, one thing I discovered years ago covering baseball and talking to former baseball players, most former professional athletes think they either were much better than they really were or much worse than they really were. So there's certain athletes that just have this level of humility about when they played, and they talk themselves down, and you're like, wow, and you were great. And I was pretty good. I did I did what I could. And then you got guys who were pretty good who think that they were Hall of Famers, or think that they were better than they were. It's usually nothing in between. Not many athletes have a complete, accurate perception of their career, except guys like Bird and Magic, who are just freaking great. But even Magic has kind of a humility, right? Magic could say, hey, I was the best player all the time. You've never heard him say that, right? You've never heard some of these guys. And I just think we're in a generation now where a lot of these guys, the guys who came in 10, 12 years ago, so you look at like the Jeff Teague podcast, Jeff Teague just finished playing. And you look at the Gilbert Arenas, Kenyon Martin, Rashad McCants podcast, and you look at these guys and they talk the league, and Kenyon Martin was a very good player, number 1 overall pick, had health issues, but played a long time. Much respect to Kenyon Martin. Mm-hmm. Gilbert Arenas, if his knees don't give out, he's a potential Hall of Famer, and as much as he's a knucklehead. He was that good, but he just couldn't stay healthy for a long time. He didn't have a very long career. And then, but Rashad McCants, like a guy who was a first-round pick in Minnesota, never really panned out, never really played, never had a signature NBA moment, the signature NBA moment, I think, is when he got drafted. I think Stern had his head turned and he tapped Stern on the back and said, "Hey, I'm here." Like, I can't on the podium. I think that was like his signature. And he's telling you about current guys who are much better careers than he had. And I think the Brandon Jennings thing is just sad. Like, guys, like Joe said, and there's a lot of things I agree with Joe on, certain things I don't. But as older as guys get, some of these guys become inflated with like, "Oh, I was good." Yeah, you were good in high school. Like, yeah, Brandon Jennings was a top 10 high school pick. He didn't go to college. He was one of those guys that went overseas and then came back. And then if I'm looking at his numbers, I know you have Adam. He had a good first 5.5 years of his career. Then suddenly he fell off a cliff. And then he became just a guy. And I know he had some injuries. And like you said, he was 28 when he finished his last NBA game. Like, he averaged 14 points in his career, almost 6 assists, shot career 38% from the field. That's not good. 41% on twos. That's not good. Like, he was not an electrifying player. He wasn't even close to an all-star. He had a good season in the lockout year. He averaged 19 a game. That was his best year. Like, a solid stretch, but not, you don't look at Brandon Jennings and be like, I just think, and I just think some of these teams, like I remember, I think he was at a Bucks game and they introduced him as a Bucks legend. Like, dudes fall into that now. Like, no, you're not a Bucks legend. Like, Oscar Robinson and Junior Bridgman and Brian Winters and Marcus Johnson and Giannis are not looking. You're not getting into the club. Like, no, like those are Bucks legends. Bobby Dandridge, those are Bucks legends. Like, no, you're not a Bucks legend. But these teams, oh, you're a former player, you're a Bucks legend. Oh, and these guys fall into that, and they basically think that they're like, and they sit on these, podcasts and they just shoot. I think there's resentment for the money these guys made. Sure. Oh, the game has gotten soft. When I was playing, oh, it wasn't like that. Oh, I went up against Kobe, and I get it. I just think in any aspect of life, like, you can't constantly harp on how hard you had it. Young people don't want to hear that shit. Excuse my language. Like, it's not your time anymore. If someone asks you, how was it? You can feel free to tell them. As a journalist, I do not tell young people how hard I had it getting to the point. Like, kids don't want to hear that. It's their time. You have to just respect it. It's easier for them, and you can't resent them for it. So I just think it's just sad. That's how it goes here with these podcasts and all these guys. And then, as I asked Joe last night, I don't know if you saw the pregame, like, kind of reminding him, like, do y'all lump all of them in with media? So Tatum's blaming us and blaming me for them being the media, called him soft. The media didn't call me soft. No, a former player called you soft. Like, not the media. Brandon Jennings is not registering for a Pro Basketball Writers Association card. Like, no. He's a guy who's on a podcast, who's a former player, who, if you really know hoops, you know who he is. I'm sure there's a lot of youngsters there, like, they might have played him in 2K, with him in 2K or something, but, they don't know this guy, like, oh, man, yeah, that dude, oh, he was like Derrick Rose. They know Derrick Rose, right? Sure. They know that dude, right? You're not Derrick Rose. You're not one of these guys that had a 12, 14-year career. You battled in playoff series. You had signature moments. Like, no, you played 6 or 7 years. You got hurt, and then your career was done. You were out of the, Brandon Jennings played in 25 playoff games. He never made it. He didn't make it past the first. He went to an Eastern Conference semis
as a reserve
in Washington in his last year in 2017. No, that was the second last year when he was just kind of a bench guy for the Wizards. Like that was his longest playoff run. He never played no finals, never played no Eastern Conference finals, nothing. So I think you have to kind of look at it like that. And I hope Jayson and those guys do look at it like that. In terms of just, okay, look at the source, as opposed to, oh man, all these media members think I'm soft. That's not right. I know I'm not soft. Like, don't listen to that. That's just crazy. It's unfortunate, but those guys say crazy things and they laugh and they giggle it up and they all talk as if because I think a lot of them, well, I was a shit in college. Yeah, you were. You were good, or not. James, like a guy like Rashad McCants. Yeah, Rashad, you were good. You were, what was he, a 15th pick? That's great. None of us can ever say that. But what happened in your career? What is your signature NBA moment? I had a 50-point game when I was like, that's nice in a regular season game, but like, to me, like, the NBA could go on without Brandon Jennings, and it's not like, well, if you're going to talk about the NBA in the 2010s, you've got to talk about Brandon Jennings. Like, no, you don't. Like, if you mention him, that's fine, but he's not. I don't get that. His best shooting year was 2011-12. He shot 42% from the field, 33% from three. That was his best shooting year from the field, was 42%.
I have to laugh at the Brandon Jennings Bucks legend comment, and just for fun, I just pulled up Michael Redd. If Brandon Jennings is a Bucks legend, I don't know what Michael Redd is, because Michael Redd kills him in every category pretty much.
Yeah,
I do want to piggyback on this. This is interesting, and I want to get to. Some people have made this point about the way the NBA covers itself, and Jennings and this podcast leans right into this. And when it comes from Brandon Jennings, one thing, or if it comes from like Shaq and Kenny and Chuck, it's a little bit different. But at the same time, it feels like the NBA tries to like kill itself from within more than any other professional sport out there right now. Like, you don't have NFL guys talking about Justin Herbert the same way guys are talking about Jayson Tatum, or you don't have baseball guys with baseball podcasts or guys on major baseball broadcasts talking about the game of baseball the way that, Chuck and Kenny talk about guys shooting too many threes in the league this year. Does this feel problematic? Is it like too much honesty? Like, it just feels like the NBA is the only.
And real quick, and this is probably where you're going with Gary, but I think, and Gary, I'm curious if you agree with this, because I watch a lot of this crap. I think the large difference is that in the NFL, former players, people like us, whoever, but we're focusing on former players, a lot of them are trying to be analysts. They are trying to give.
I think it's inside the NBA-itis. Like, there's one inside the NBA, or there's Countdown, where Stephen A. and Perk, they've seen Perk go at guys and become successful and make a lot of money and become a media personality for being, like critical, right? And I just think these guys, they can say what they want. There's no filter. There's no FCC. There's no one saying anything like, hey, you might want to calm down on using this language, or might not want to talk about Angel Reese in this fashion, or things like that. That's misogynist, sexist, things like that. No. There's no filters there. They just, I'm keeping it real. And you got a lot of guys who probably either A, need the money, or two, don't need the money in a sense, and just want to just be, and what's the guy, DJ Adamix, with his podcast, the what I'm talking about, probably, Evan, right? DJ Adamix. He's like a ADIKMEK, something like that. I have to look.
This is too cool for me. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'll look him
up.
I'm
not cool anymore, so I'm already. I don't know what the young kids are listening to.
One more break. We got to tell you that today's show, it's powered by Game Time. There is nothing better than going to a game live. It's fun to watch on TV. It's certainly fun to talk sports. We do it here on this show, but to be there, to be watching, so many core memories.
Yeah, and Game Time helps you in a cajillion different ways. New feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. They filter out all the fluff to show you the most incredible deals on great seats, so don't waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And look, there are different ways for you to know how good the deal is that you're about to snag via Game Time. They have something that's labeled great deal, amazing deal, but the best tickets are labeled super deal, which means the tickets you're looking at that particular moment, the top 1% of prices based on the value for that game. And that, Kaufman, is usually the first thing you see when we're scrolling through tickets. So make sure if you're looking at Game Time, you're looking for super deal. Those are the best. Plus, with Game Time, you get all in pricing, which for me is one of the greatest inventions ever, because, I hate getting to the end and seeing all the taxes and fees and all things I have to pay for that I didn't realize I had to pay for.
Charges.
Yep. Game Time takes care of that from the jump, which is great. You get a panoramic view from your seat, so you make sure that your view is spectacular. And if you find a lower price, Kaufman, they will refund you, credit you 110% of the difference. So you're making money if you find somehow, some way, find tickets for less.
Buy your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS, get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code. It's CLNS. Get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, DJ Akimix. He's an American podcaster and internet personality, right? So he is.
Yeah, I pulled him up.
Okay, so that's the guy who's going off about Drake and Kendrick Lamar, and I know this, and I heard, like, he has a podcast where he's just
first headline that pops up. DJ, however you pronounce it, academics.
Yeah,
academics. Okay.
Yeah, I botched it.
It's all right.
It's not spelt the way academics is spelled. That's by design. DJ Academics claims Drake would help LeBron James cheat on his wife.
Yes. Okay. So that's his podcast, right? And that's like, and he's just throwing daggers at people. And I just think these players see that and be like, I want to do that. I want to just be like laying dudes out. And I want to tell them how hard it was when I played. And some of these guys resent not being in the league. They resent how they exited the league. The league said to Brandon Jennings, we don't need you anymore. You're a 30-year-old has-been, or you don't bring anything to the table, so you'll be out of the league. Like, you didn't know, so he didn't get signed, or he had to go overseas. Like, I just think guys are letting their personal resentments and how their career ended, or a coach they played for, they let that affect how they feel about today's younger players. I don't know, Evan, if like it's a situation where the NBA is eating its young, but I do think that there's a high level of criticism from a lot of the former players. And like you said, you don't see that in the NFL, but you don't have, how do I put it? Like, you don't have an inside the NBA and the NFL. Like, you have, ESP, like, you have First Take rip some guys or whatever, or Rex Ryan will really keep it real. I mean, he's a guy who's kind of on that precipice of like, just taking on it. That was a stupid call. What kind of play call was that? Like, but Rex is also looking to be a coach again. Right. And Rex wants to show you how much he knows.
Or you've got like Good Morning Football, but that's an NFL property.
Yeah, they're not. Yes, they're not going to rip anybody. They'll be maybe critical of a play, but they're not going to let him hang a player out to dry. I think the NBA is just somehow different. I said everybody's got inside the NBA-itis. Everybody thinks that they could beat Chuck and Shaq and Ernie and Kenny. And these guys go on these podcasts with, I said, no filter, no FCC, and just say whatever the hell they want because they want to be significant too. Some of these guys, they've spent their life being famous. So they want to continue to be famous. They don't want to go into the spotlight or out of the spotlight and like live a private life or go back into general business and become a businessman and not think about basketball, or, hey, I'll, make an appearance at a reunion here, but yeah, I'm working at this company. Like, some guys have that planned out, or they want to coach. Now I don't think these guys want to coach. I think, a team would be crazy to hire. You want to hire Gilbert? You want Gilbert Arenas to work with your kids? Like, you know what I'm saying? Although his son is a great player, like, these guys are killing their chances. The league can pay you back if you finish playing and you want to work in the league. Sometimes you just got to go through the channels. You might have to go into the G League. You might have to be a seventh assistant on the staff, but it can work. But if you keep talking about guys like this, you're never going to get a chance. So I don't know what the agenda of a Brandon Jennings. Brandon Jennings is obviously 35 years old. His professional basketball career is over. So what are you going to do for the next 40 years? Like, some of these guys don't, I just think there's a lot of that goes into it, simply because I think guys are bitter about the money that these guys make. The salaries have risen exponentially since the new CBA. Remember all those guys that made remember the 2016 when Evan Turner and Luol Deng all made that 4-year, either 64 or 72, Kent Bazemore, and that was crazy money to make $18 million. And now you got guys who are making $18 million, and that's a very tradable, easy to go in, slip, plug in and play contract. And we're not even 10 years after that. If a guy makes 18, that's nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Like, your point, because it's right here on Basketball Reference. You want to guess what Brandon Jennings' career earnings were?
Is it 18 million?
I would say no.
More than that.
Yeah, it's either 30, 35 or 40, 30, 30 something.
You got to remember the era that he played in. 40 and a half.
Yeah.
No, it's, I don't know his finances. I don't know, how he invested his
money. Fred Van Vliet, that's Fred Van Vliet's salary this year.
Right.
But here's the thing, though. Like, you talked about the NBA, inside the NBA itis. Like, it means, I'm sorry, Brandon Jennings and Gilbert Arenas and Kenyon Martin and Rashad McCants, like, it means a little something different when you have Charles Barkley, who is, I beg kids to go back and look at Chuck's rebounding numbers. Like, he out-rebounded Shaq in their primes. Like, that's insane. Shaq's a multi-champion, right? Kenny Smith, champion. Like, those guys have the resumes. But Brandon Jennings doesn't have a resume. Like, that's the thing that I don't – like, dude, you don't have the resume. And, like, to get to the back to, like, the coaching point, these guys go into podcasting instead of coaching. Look at Doug Christie, right? Doug Christie, who most young Zillennials have no idea how good that guy was.
I know who his wife is.
Yeah. But that's like, go back and watch the Kings games when him and Mike Bibby and Chris Webber and Vlade Divac and Bobby Jackson, like, those guys were awesome. Yes. And they were going up against an insanely talented Lakers team and took them to the brink. They lost. Totally get it. But they, like, to see Doug Christie as the head coach of the Kings is super cool to me. And he elected that path instead of getting on a podcast and trying to take down Jayson Tatum and Anthony Edwards,
hanging. And guys, I said, when you start hanging the current players, like, you're killing your chance of being employed in the league. The league pays a lot of people's bills, like, whether it be obviously the players, but coaches, scouts, whatever you want to do. You want to coach in the G League? If you have to coach in the G League, like, there's ways to make a living and be a long time through the NBA. You want to get into, be a assistant general man. Like, there's so many ways the league can offer you to have a salary. You don't have to work a 9 to 5. You just have to work for your team or be a scout or whatever. And these guys, to me, are just blowing that opportunity. And who cares? Maybe they don't want that. But I just think there's something to a lot of these guys are unhappy with with how their career ended. They're unhappy with the money that these guys made, because Brandon Jennings is, if he's 25 now, he's probably making $30 million a year. He's making Tyler Hero money, right? And he's, why can I be, like, how come I didn't make that? Like you said, Adam, $40 million over his career. How much does he have left? How much I think he maxed out at what? He made the most in his career, $8.3 million was the most he made. That's mid-level exception money now. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. That's 2015, 16. So that's 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. Like the salaries have gone up. The league's gotten popular. That new collective bargaining agreement, that 1 year where the players refused to escalate slowly. And so they said, we don't want all our money now. So whoever was a free agent in the summer of 16 cashed in big time. And none of those guys, Evan Turner, remember he got $5.70 from Portland. I mean, and I don't think he finished that contract. I know Luol Deng didn't finish that contract with the Lakers. Timothy Mozgov, the $4.64 he got, that's what got Mitch Kupchak fired in LA. Like, there was so much that's happened in the 10 years and 15 years since these guys have played. I think these guys are just upset and they're bitter. Jayson Tatum's making $50 million a year. Like, he was born at the right time. Jaylen Brown's making $300 million over 5. Like, you can't hate the game, don't hate the player. Like, you can't be resentful. You've got to understand it's their time. Somebody, now I don't know, you guys tell me, how old is the first $100 million player in the NBA?
What a question. Does Wemby crack this at some point with the way that he's going?
You think it's Wemby? So it's Wemby? Or is this kid 16 somewhere? Like, who is how old is the first $100 million a year player? Because we're up to 60, right? 63? So 5 to 7 to 8 years, maybe?
What kind of resentment is that going to bring? I'll tell you that. Holy cow. I mean, that's going to transcend sports too. I mean, you have like Ohtani and Soto are making, a cajillion dollars per year now. I mean, it's just.
Well, think about what the highest paid hockey player will be making at the time.
Oh, well, nothing close.
Not even a fifth. Do you remember the it's opposite end of the spectrum? You're talking about $100 million a year, obviously, but do you remember the NBA's first $100 million contract?
Wasn't it Juwan Howard, right?
Juwan Howard, 1996.
Yeah. With 7 years, 105 or something like that. People thought it was insane.
Yeah. At least we got rid of those long contracts too. Those are tough.
Yeah, Shohei. I mean, Shohei makes 70. Didn't Soto get 70 a year?
I don't think it's 70 based on because he's got like a 14-year contract.
Okay,
so that's going to be. And then all these deferrals, which is I think the funniest part of this whole thing is we can defer all these payments.
765 over 15 was Soto.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, I think there's a level of resentment. There's a level of just, guys watching these podcasts and these other podcasts, and these guys just taking shots at each other. And then I think it's the locker room talk element. You get a bunch of former players with no filter, and they're just talking, and you literally have Kwame Brown on his on YouTube ripping LeBron James. I just what I'm saying. And I'm a guy. I'm not a big Kwame was a bust. I think he got really put in a real bad position, being Jordan's first draft pick and going straight to the league. He probably should have went to Florida's. What he signed with, he probably should have needed more maturity. And he lasted 12 years in the league. He wasn't a complete bust, but he's up there ripping LeBron. Some of these guys who are serviceable players are just like you said, like Brandon, are taking just shots at guys. So you hope, for my sake, personally, selfishly, that Tatum doesn't blame quote unquote the media for what Brandon Jennings said. And that's something you may pull aside and go, hey, Jason, I ain't say that and I ain't write that. That's a former player. That's one of your brethren. Not to be funny, but just because it was on a podcast does not make him a media member. So.
No, 100%. I mean, it's all, again, whether it's resentment or just sort of looking for relevancy. Like, hey, I still exist. That's
yes. I think it's a combination of that, Adam. I think it's celebrity is a drug, and these guys want to be popular. They want to still be in the spotlight. They want to be respected. Some athletes are very good from walking away from the game and never seeing them again, or you only see them in a reunion, and they're going to private practice, big business, and they do what they do, and they've handled their money well, and they live comfortable lives, and you see them here and there, and hey, how you doing? And there's guys who are like, no, I still need to be a part of this. Y'all still need to know who I am, and that's a problem.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I just, whatever. We can go on forever on this, but I was just thinking about how, again, like, Chuck and Shaq especially, but Kenny is, obviously part of it. Like, these guys are entertainers. They like Chuck and Shaq couldn't name half the players in the league or tell you who they play for, and will readily admit that. It's like, and it's just to Evan's point, like in the NFL, there are a bunch of podcasts. Hell, like Brian Hoyer and David Andrews have a podcast. I don't know who listens to it, but it exists. But they're not out there taking shots at guys. In the NFL, those are few and far between. Like, you can have KG podcast, you can have like the all the smoke podcasts and stuff, like all that stuff. And in the NFL, it's like the show that Ocho and Sharp do. Like that's it. They're talking about, sexual positions off Instagram Live and stuff like. They're not even talking about the sport half the time. So it's, it's just.
I think it was some value there, guys, from these podcasts when guys would tell stories from back in the day that they could not tell during their playing days. And some of them were funny, sad, all the above. Playing my first time playing, like. When guys used to be were mostly telling their story. Hey, what was your introduction? What was your welcome to the NBA? Or what was your welcome to the NFL moment? Oh, I had to, went head up and try to tackle Jerome Bettis and got a concussion. Like, it was all these funny stories or stories about the life that I think we're all fascinated with. Or you want to hear what it was like for a guy to go up against Kobe for the first time and things like that. But now it's shifted from that to like, this guy sucks and I could take this guy and if he played in my day, like it becomes the delusional thinking and the like we talked about it, like Joe's like you thought you were a better player than you really were, and this guy needs to do this, but he's like a 5-time All-Star and you didn't make any All-Star games, like And then you got current player, you got the Draymond Green podcast, who's just Draymond's laying guys out, that he doesn't like. Okay, here's a list of guys I don't like, and here's why I don't like them, and here's why they suck. Like, so the players some of the current players got to take that on themselves too, especially like Draymond's funny, he doesn't hold, he punches, and does he have a ticket to joining the TNT team or the whoever team, the Amazon team when he finishes? Probably so. Playing so, but maybe people are taking a page out of that too.
Again, Celtics back at it on Sunday, host the Pelicans, and then you got Toronto north of the border, back home against Orlando, who are getting healthier, by the way. Paolo's back. Banchero's return. Wagner can't be far behind. Then you get Suggs eventually. Like, just remember, we've had multiple people on this show come on and say Orlando, not Cleveland, the Celtics' biggest threat in the Eastern Conference. Let's see what it all looks like when everybody's healthy, if in fact that comes to fruition. But mid-season and All-Star break and all that stuff, it's right around the corner as well. Gary, we've kept you long enough, but we always enjoy when you hop on. Of course, Gary Washburn from the Boston Globe, from CLNS, has the Big Three podcast with Kwani and Sherrod. Make sure you check it out. Subscribe to that as well. Gary, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Remember, rate, review, most importantly, subscribe to the Celtics Beat podcast. Evan and I will be back with you next week.